The Unseen Visitor, a terrifying tale of extraterrestrial horror. Chapter 1. The arrival. The bright lights of the spaceship broke through the cloud cover, illuminating the small town below. The citizens of Utopia had never seen anything like it, and they stood frozen on the streets, staring up at the massive vessel parked in the sky. As night fell, the ship began to descend, hovering above the town square. The people watched in awe as the ship's hatch opened, and a figure emerged. It was humanoid in shape but appeared to be covered in a thick, slimy substance that glistened in the moonlight. The creature spoke in a language no one could understand, and the people listened in confusion and fear. They had never encountered anything like this before, and they had no idea what the creature's intentions were. As the creature continued to speak, a strange energy began to emanate from it. It was a palpable force that could be felt by everyone standing in the square. Suddenly, the building across the street exploded, sending debris flying in all directions. Panic set in as the people began to scatter, running and screaming in every direction. The creature watched with detached interest, seeming to take pleasure in the chaos it had caused. The town was thrown into a state of disarray as the creature continued to wreak havoc. Buildings were destroyed, and people were injured or killed. Those who managed to escape fled into the surrounding countryside, hoping to find safety in the open fields. But the creature wasn't finished yet. It continued its rampage, destroying everything in its path. As the night wore on, the people of Utopia realized that they were no match for this powerful being. And so, with heavy hearts, they resigned themselves to their fate. They knew that they had made a grave mistake in welcoming the stranger into their town. But now, it was too late to turn back. They could only hope that someone, somewhere, would find a way to stop it before it was too late. Chapter 2. First Contact. The incident in Utopia had made global headlines, and the world was on high alert. Governments around the world convened emergency meetings, trying to devise a plan to deal with the alien threat. In Washington, a team of experts was assembled to make first contact with the creature. They were led by Dr. Sarah Lee, a brilliant scientist whose expertise in xenobiology was unmatched. As they boarded their spacecraft, Lee felt a sense of trepidation. She knew that nothing could fully prepare her for what lay ahead. The team set course for the alien ship, carefully scanning for any signs of danger. When they arrived, they were greeted by the same creature that had terrorized Utopia. Lee approached the creature, her heart pounding in her chest. She held out a hand, hoping to establish some sort of communication. The creature hesitated for a moment before reaching out a tentacle of its own. The two touched, and there was a brief moment of silence. Suddenly, Lee's mind was filled with images. She saw the creature's home planet, a barren wasteland devoid of life. She saw the creature's people, a dying race desperate for a new home. The creature spoke to her, its voice echoing in her head. It explained that it had come to Earth in search of a new home for its people. Lee listened in astonishment. She had never imagined that the creature was anything other than a mindless, destructive force. As the conversation continued, Lee realized that the creature was not a threat, but a refugee. It had been driven from its own world by a devastating war, and it had come to Earth in search of a new home. Lee knew that she had to find a way to communicate this to the world. She organized a press conference, where she revealed the truth about the alien creature. There were mixed reactions to the news. Some saw the creature as a threat that needed to be destroyed, while others saw it as an opportunity to make contact with a new civilization. Despite the controversy, Lee continued to communicate with the creature. She learned more about its culture and its people, and she worked tirelessly to find a way to help them. In the end, Lee's efforts paid off. The creature was granted asylum on Earth, and it and its people were welcomed with open arms. The incident in Utopia had been a terrifying ordeal, but it had ultimately led to a remarkable discovery. For the first time in human history, Earth had made contact with an alien civilization, and it was a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. Chapter 3. Lockdown. The euphoria of making first contact with an alien civilization was short-lived. As the days passed, the world began to realize the potential dangers of harboring an unknown species on their planet. Despite Dr. Lee's assurances that the alien race posed no threat to humans, many remained skeptical. There were rumors that the aliens were carrying deadly infectious diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Governments around the world began to implement strict measures to ensure the safety of their citizens. Airports and borders were shut down, and travel between countries was strictly forbidden. But the most extreme measures were taken by the government of the United States. They ordered a complete lockdown of their country, closing all of their borders to foreign travelers. The decision was met with widespread protests and outrage. People took to the streets, demanding their freedom to move about the country. But the government remained firm in their decision, citing the need to protect the population from the unknown risks associated with the alien race. As the weeks passed, the lockdown took a toll on the country. Businesses shut down, and people were forced to stay inside their homes for extended periods of time. The once bustling cities were now eerily silent and empty. But the most concerning aspect of the lockdown was the increasing hostility towards the aliens. There were reports of vigilante groups forming, intent on taking matters into their own hands. There were even rumors of a secret government task force being created to hunt down and eliminate the aliens. Dr. Lee knew that she had to act fast to prevent a catastrophe. She organized a meeting with the leaders of the major world powers, pleading with them to lift the lockdown and allow her to continue her research. She argued that the xenobiology team had made remarkable progress in establishing communication with the aliens. They had even begun to develop a friendship with the creatures, learning from them in ways that could revolutionize their understanding of the universe. Despite some initial reluctance, the leaders eventually agreed to allow Dr. Lee and her team to continue their work. They lifted the lockdown, allowing normal life to resume once again. It was a relief for many, but tensions remained high. The protest movements in the U.S. refused to back down, determined to take matters into their own hands. And no one could predict what the future would hold for the fragile peace that now existed between humans and their extraterrestrial friends. Chapter 4. Mutiny. The lifting of the lockdown brought about a new set of problems. It was discovered that some of the aliens carried dangerous viruses that could be deadly to humans. Panic set in once again, and countries began to impose new restrictions on the aliens' movements. As the situation continued to spiral out of control, the aliens grew frustrated with their treatment. They had left their home planet in search of a new home, only to find themselves prisoners on a foreign world. Their resentment grew until it reached a boiling point. One day, without warning, the aliens rebelled. They broke free from their containment facilities and began to wreak havoc across the planet. Dr. Lee and her team were caught off guard by the sudden rebellion. They had thought that their friendship with the aliens was ironclad, never imagining that they would turn on them so quickly. As the chaos spread, Dr. Lee realized that there was only one solution. She had to find a way to communicate with the aliens and plead with them to stop the violence. She convinced the world leaders to allow her to meet with the leaders of the alien race. They were hesitant, fearing for her safety, but they eventually agreed. Dr. Lee journeyed deep into the mountains, where the aliens had set up their base of operations. She was greeted by the alien leader, a towering figure covered in shimmering scales. At first, the alien refused to listen. It was angry and resentful, seeing humans as nothing more than oppressors who sought to control and enslave them. But Dr. Lee was persistent. She spoke of their friendship and the bonds they had formed over the months of communication. Slowly, the alien leader began to realize that not all humans were the same. Dr. Lee was different, showing true compassion and understanding for their plight. Eventually, the alien leader agreed to call off the rebellion. They would agree to work with humans, but only on their own terms. The world leaders breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that the conflict had been resolved peacefully. The aliens returned to their confinement facilities, but this time, they were treated with greater respect and understanding. And Dr. Lee realized that this was just the beginning. There would be many more challenges to come as humans and aliens struggled to coexist. But she was ready for whatever came her way, knowing that in the end, friendship and understanding were the keys to a peaceful future. Chapter 5. The hive mind months had passed since the mutiny, and progress had been made towards establishing a harmonious relationship with the aliens. Dr. Lee and her team had made tremendous headway in understanding the aliens' language and culture. But they soon discovered that there was much more to the aliens than they had initially thought. They had stumbled upon a discovery that would change their understanding of the universe forever. Through their painstaking research and communication with the aliens, they had discovered that the creatures were part of a hive mind. Their minds were all connected, allowing them to share thoughts and knowledge in a way that was impossible for humans to comprehend. The implications of this discovery were staggering. The aliens possessed a level of intelligence that was beyond anything humans had ever seen. They had no need for governments or leaders, as they all thought and acted as one. The alien leader explained that the hive mind had been present on their home planet for millions of years. It had enabled them to evolve and advance in ways that were unimaginable to humans. As the realization of what this meant for humanity sank in, Dr. Lee knew that she had to tread carefully. The power of the hive mind could be used for good or evil, and it was up to humans to decide which path they would take. She organized a meeting with the world leaders, hoping to convince them to work with the aliens to harness the power of the hive mind for the betterment of humanity. At first, the leaders were hesitant, wary of relinquishing their power to an unknown force. But Dr. Lee argued that working together with the aliens could lead to unprecedented progress in the fields of science and medicine. She pointed to the aliens' advanced knowledge of medicine, explaining that they had discovered cures for diseases that had baffled human scientists for centuries. Eventually, the leaders agreed to form a partnership with the aliens. They would pool their resources and work together to unlock the potential of the hive mind. But with this newfound cooperation came new challenges. There were those who saw the hive mind as a threat to humanity, and there were rumors of a shadowy group working to silence the aliens and prevent their knowledge from spreading. Dr. Lee knew that there was much work to be done. The hive mind was a powerful tool that had the potential to change the course of human history. But in order to succeed, they would need to work together and overcome the fears and prejudices that had divided them for so long. Chapter 6. Desperate Measures. Dr. Lee worked tirelessly to promote unity between humans and aliens. But despite their progress, there were still those who rejected the new way of thinking. Fear and mistrust continued to linger, fueled by a constant flow of misinformation and propaganda. And then, disaster struck. A new virus began to sweep across the world, causing widespread panic and chaos. It was more deadly than anything humans had ever seen before, and it was spreading at an alarming rate. As the death toll rose, governments scrambled to find a solution. They turned to the aliens, hoping that their advanced medical technology could provide a cure. But the aliens were hesitant. They had warned humans about the dangers of interspecies diseases, and they feared that the virus could mutate into something even more deadly if they attempted to treat it. Dr. Lee knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. She convinced the alien leader to work with her team to find a cure, no matter the risks. They worked around the clock, poring over data and running experiments in a race against time. And then, finally, they had a breakthrough. They had discovered a potential cure, but it required the use of the hive mind. The virus was so deadly that they had to act quickly, and the hive mind was the only way to spread the cure to the infected population. The world leaders were hesitant, but they agreed to give it a try. They were desperate, and they knew that they had no other options. The aliens began to share the cure through the hive mind, transmitting it to the infected population with lightning speed. And miraculously, it worked. The virus began to recede, and people started to recover. But this newfound hope was short-lived. Those who opposed the use of the hive mind saw it as an opportunity to strike. They launched a coordinated attack on the alien containment facilities, determined to silence them once and for all. Dr. Lee and her team were caught in the crossfire, struggling to find a way to protect themselves and their extraterrestrial friends. It was a fight for survival, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. In the end, they emerged victorious, but it had come at a cost. The world had been forever changed by the events that had unfolded. And Dr. Lee knew that the fight for unity and understanding would go on, as humans and aliens struggled to coexist in a constantly changing world. Chapter 7. The final showdown. The attack on the alien containment facilities had brought the world to the brink of chaos. It had shattered the fragile alliance between humans and aliens, plunging them back into an era of distrust and fear. Dr. Lee knew that they had to act quickly. She worked tirelessly to bring the warring factions together, hoping to prevent a full-blown war that could destroy them all. But her efforts were in vain. The anti-alien groups had grown too powerful, too entrenched in their fear and hatred. They saw the aliens as a threat to their way of life, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to eliminate them once and for all. The tension between the two sides continued to escalate, until it finally reached a tipping point. It was clear that war was inevitable, and both sides began to prepare for the final showdown. Dr. Lee and her team worked feverishly to find a solution. They knew that the outcome of this conflict would determine the fate of humanity for generations to come. And then, a glimmer of hope. They had discovered a way to use the hive mind to communicate with the anti-alien groups. They thought that if they could find a way to show them the humanity of the creatures they were fighting against, they might be able to prevent the conflict from escalating. They organized a meeting between the leaders of both sides, hoping that they could find a way to build understanding and reconciliation. It was tense and volatile, with the two sides at each other's throats. But then, something unexpected happened. As the leaders of the anti-alien groups were confronted with the reality of the situation, of the lives and suffering of the aliens they had been fighting against, some of them began to waver. Slowly but surely, a sense of humanity was rekindled within them. They saw that they had been wrong, that their prejudices and fears had blinded them to the truth. And they realized that if they didn't act soon, it would be too late. With newfound conviction, they pledged themselves to work together with the aliens and humans to create a better world. It was a turning point, a history-making moment that would be remembered for generations to come. Dr. Lee looked on with pride, knowing that they had managed to bring the world back from the brink. The universe was a vast, unknowable place, but it was also full of wonder and hope. And as she looked to the future, she knew that there would be more challenges to come. But she also knew that as long as they had the strength to stand together, they would emerge victorious.